Hooey from the Orient by H.L. Mencken. From the American Mercury, November 1931. A review of The Mysterious Madam by C. E. Bocheffer Roberts, New York, 1931. The likeness of Helena Petrovna Blavetsky, 1831-91, Gib. Khan, founder and for 16 years Grand Panjamdrum of the Theosophical Society, to Mrs. Mary Baker Eddy, must strike every connoisseur of the higher mountebankery. Both emerged from obscure and stupid family circles. Both invented romantic biographies for themselves. Both played heavily with love before giving it up as a bad job. Both began their professional careers as conventional magicians and only gradually developed their own arcana. Both were copious and shameless plagiarists. Both suffered from lifelong malaises. Both were constantly beset by demons. Both loved money and knew how to get it. Both suspected their immediate followers of evil designs, and both have been purged post-mortem of their plentiful blunders and rascalities, and elevated to what amounts, substantially, to sainthood. La Eddy, on the whole, must be set down as the more respectable character. Her 3 marriages are hard to explain, and her stealings from Quimby and other such forerunners defy explanation altogether. But her New England upbringing saved her from the more gross and overt kinds of indecorum. La Blavetsky, a Russian of mixed Slavic, Jewish, and German ancestry, was a far rougher person. She smoked incessantly, in a day when it was simply not done by ladies. She swore like a second mate, and there is sound reason for believing that she once committed bigamy. But these peccadilloes add to her charm almost as much as they take away from her respectability. She was indeed a most salty and amusing old harridan. Also, she was a fraud, pure and unadulterated, a fraud deliberate, unconscionable, and unmitigated. She started out in a life as a professional spiritualist, and the banal tricks of that amusing trade were always her chief reliances. She materialized the forms of Kut Humi and her other preposterous Mahatmas, precisely as the hard-working mediums in back streets materialize the forms of Wawa, the Indian chief. That is to say, she had them confected of stuffed pillows and other such lowly stuff, and then danced them before her dupes in dark rooms. She had a cabinet with a sliding door at the back, and from it she produced letters from Tibet, all written in her own hand, with curious Russified letters, and other such marvels. Her books were all clumsy plagiarisms. In Isis Unveiled, a diligent critic discovered 2,000 passages borrowed from other treatises on occultism, not to mention 700 blunders in names, words, and numbers, and 600 misstatements of fact. She was caught over and over again. Her very assistants exposed her more than once with exact specifications. But she relied confidently upon the illimitable credulity of her followers, and was not disappointed. Like the patrons of Mrs. Eddy, they were insatiable gluttons for punishment. The more she was exposed, the more firmly they believed in her. Thousands of them continue to do so to this day. Theosophy has never made the worldly success of Christian Science, but it still has a ponderable following, both in Europe and in America, and every now and then the faithful are worked by some new operator. Its tenets are unanimously nonsensical. They are not merely dubious, they are downright insane. In part, they are borrowed from the moony speculations of such European mystics as Jakob Boehme. In part, they come from the common claptrap of professional occultists, which is to say, of persons on a level, morally and intellectually, with mind readers at county fairs. And in part, they are a stale and ignorant rehash of so-called Oriental philosophy. This Oriental philosophy is the product of Hindus who believe that cows have souls, that adepts can fly through the air without the use of wings or gasoline, and that a man who permits his daughter to go unmarried so much as 24 hours beyond the onset of puberty is doomed to hell. In brief, it is the product of degraded ignoramuses who make India a sewer of superstition. How does it come that such imbeciles win converts in the West, and are even spoken of respectfully now and then by presumably learned men? There are two reasons. The first is that they are embodied in scriptures, which also include a great deal of metaphysics, and metaphysics, to certain types of mind, always seems profound, even when it is palpably balderdash. The other is that not a few of the more ancient Indian ideas, working their way westward by way of Persia, Egypt, and Greece, were embedded in Christianity by the early fathers, and have thus come to have a familiar and pious flavor. But they are just as silly in the book of Revelation and in the lucubrations of Athanasius, Tertullian, and Augustine as they are in the Indian Vedas. To discuss them seriously is to turn one's back upon every intellectual decency. They are precisely equivalent to the philosophizing of phrenologists, chiropractors, and communists. One Blavetsky tells far more about the human race than a whole herd of psychologists. Her works offer massive proof that even in the midst of what seems to be civilization, Neanderthal Man is still with us.